delve into the dark and complex history of America as we uncover the shocking roots of slavery in the United States. Long before the American colonies declared independence, the seeds of slavery had already been planted deep into the soil of the New World. The institution of slavery in America did not arise in isolation. It was part of a broader global system of forced labor and human trafficking that spanned continents and centuries. At the center of this system was the transatlantic slave trade, one of the most horrific and inhumane chapters in human history. Over the course of 400 years, more than 12 million African men, women, and children were kidnapped, sold, and transported across the Atlantic Ocean, torn from their homelands, families, cultures, and identities. They were treated as cargo, packed tightly into the holds of ships in unimaginable conditions, many not surviving the voyage known as the Middle Passage. Those who did survive found themselves in unfamiliar lands where they were bought and sold like livestock, stripped of their names, languages, and rights, and subjected to a lifetime of forced labor and abuse. In colonial America, slavery became deeply woven into the economic and social fabric, especially in the southern colonies, where large plantations relied on enslaved Africans to cultivate cash crops such as tobacco, rice, sugar, and eventually cotton. These plantations became the economic engine of the colonies, and later, the early United States. But this prosperity came at an unbearable human cost. Enslaved people were denied their humanity, their freedom, and any legal protection. They were beaten, raped, tortured, and even murdered with little or no consequence to their enslavers. Families were torn apart as children were sold away from their mothers, husbands separated from wives. Resistance was met with severe punishment, yet still many resisted, through rebellion, escape, sabotage, and the preservation of their cultural heritage. Slavery was not merely a southern institution. It existed throughout the North in various forms, from domestic servitude to labor in ports and shipyards. Many of America's founding fathers, including George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, were themselves enslavers, even as they penned lofty ideals of liberty and equality. The Constitution itself codified the status of enslaved people as property, counting them as 3/5 of a person for purposes of representation, while denying them basic rights and protections. As America grew, so too did the tension between the values it claimed to uphold and the reality of slavery. The expansion of the cotton economy after the invention of the cotton gin in 1793 only deepened the nation's dependence on slavery. By the mid-19th century, the United States had become a nation divided between North and South, abolition and slavery. Key events began to shape the national conversation. The publication of abolitionist literature like Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, the activism of Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and William Lloyd Garrison, and violent uprisings like Nat Turner's Rebellion. The Underground Railroad became a lifeline for thousands seeking freedom, with brave conductors like Harriet Tubman risking their lives to guide the enslaved to liberty. The political landscape was equally tumultuous. The Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act all attempted and failed to contain the growing conflict over slavery. The Dred Scott decision of 1857, in which the Supreme Court ruled that African Americans could not be citizens and had no rights the white man was bound to respect, sent shockwaves through the nation. As tensions reached a boiling point, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 became the catalyst for secession. 11 southern states broke away from the Union, forming the Confederacy and plunging the country into a brutal civil war. The Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, was the bloodiest conflict in American history. While initially framed as a battle to preserve the Union, it became increasingly clear that slavery was at the heart of the conflict. With the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Lincoln declared freedom for enslaved people in Confederate territories. Yet freedom on paper did not guarantee freedom in reality. It was only with the Union's victory and the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865 that slavery was officially abolished in the United States. But abolition did not bring true equality. The Reconstruction era was marked by hope and betrayal. For a brief moment, African Americans gained political power, access to education, and civil rights. However, white backlash was swift and brutal. The rise of white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, along with the implementation of black codes and later Jim Crow laws, ushered in a new era of racial oppression. Sharecropping, voter suppression, lynching, and systemic discrimination ensured that the legacy of slavery endured long after its legal end. Slavery's impact continues to shape American society to this day. The racial wealth gap, mass incarceration, police violence, housing discrimination, and educational inequality are all part of this legacy. The very structures of American power, legal, political, economic, were built upon the exploitation of black labor. While progress has been made through the civil rights movement, legal reforms, and cultural shifts, the struggle for true racial justice is far from over. Understanding the roots of slavery in the United States is not just an academic exercise. It is essential to confronting the present. It challenges us to reckon with a history too often whitewashed or ignored, to honor the memory of those who suffered and resisted, and to recognize how past injustices echo in the present. It calls on us to build a more just future, informed by the truth of our past. This story features key figures whose courage and resilience changed the course of history. Harriet Tubman, whose heroism on the Underground Railroad led hundreds to freedom. Frederick Douglass, a brilliant orator and writer who escaped slavery to become a powerful voice for justice. Abraham Lincoln, whose leadership during the Civil War led to the end of slavery. But there were also countless unnamed heroes, those who resisted in silence, who nurtured culture and community under oppression, who dreamed of a freedom they might never see, but whose descendants would. This is their story. This is our story. The history of slavery in America is not just black history, it is American history. And to understand our country, we must first understand this brutal, foundational truth. Join us as we explore this history in depth, from the first slave ships to the fight for civil rights, from laws that enslaved to movements that liberated. Witness the pain, the resistance, the survival, and the legacy. This video is a must-watch for anyone seeking to learn the unvarnished truth about America's past, the injustices that persist, and the enduring hope for a better future.